Will your financial foundation stand strong in a storm? Rich in Good offers wisdom for true wealth, so that you can construct a solid foundation to richly enjoy all stages of your life. We talk about finance and faith that'll help you find meaning in money. Discover how to make money matter so that you can be rich in good.
Welcome to a new episode of Rich in Good. It's episode number 8. I'm joined by Henny du Plessis. Welcome, Henny.
Hi, Willem.
Yeah, it's great to have a chat about faith and finances, but also money and the deeper meaning of money. So we ended our previous session together with a quote from Billy Graham, if you just want to read that again.
Yeah, very powerful quote this. If a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area of his life.
Oh, that's wonderful. And as I said 2 weeks ago, I had the honor to work with the Lausanne movement, the movement that started in 1974, founded by Billy Graham and John Stott. But we had a wonderful couple of days in Manila where we worked on the Generosity Manifesto for the Lausanne 24 conference. So I was thinking back to February 2018, where I attended my first and my only in-person to date Kingdom Advisor Conference in Florida. And during that conference, they basically came on the stage just after a session of worship and before the teaching, and they announced the passing of Billy Graham. So I always very strongly associate the work of the Lausanne movement reaching the nations with what's happened at that Kingdom Advisors conference. So may we continue to advance his legacy. In other words, be good stewards, free up resources, but not just for ourselves, but also to bless other people. Sure. But very important to bless the nations. Yeah. I always remember the words of the Lord to Abraham in Genesis 12, where he says, I will bless you and make you a great nation, but I want you to be a blessing to the nations. Sure. God blesses us for the advancement of the gospel and the proclamation of the gospel to the ends of the earth. Sure. So we can talk about finances and faith, but if it's not about the freeing up of resources that people can be reached with the good news of Jesus Christ, sure, then we're missing the point. Right. So we anchor this podcast series, Reaching Good, in a very specific verse. So do you want to read it to our viewers?
So the 1 Timothy 6 verse 18, God says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Yeah,
I mean, this is Timothy getting instruction from Paul. But this is a command from God to command especially wealthy people to be rich in good deeds. Right, so we're working on the parable of the talents by Jesus that's recorded in Matthew 25. If you missed last week's podcast or YouTube, you can just go back. We basically spend some time on verse 14. So we're going to read this parable over a period of about 4 weeks. So we started last week, and then this week, and in the 2 weeks to come. But moving on in this parable, Henny, can you read verse 21 of Matthew 25 to our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.
Okay. So it is the servant who belongs to his master, and the servant is looking after property and possessions that belongs to the master. Yeah. God owns it all. That was the lesson that we learned in the previous session. But then this steward, this servant, takes little and grows it to more. Yeah. Okay. So there's a growth, there's a progression, and then he shares in his master's happiness. So there's definitely not just a growth in assets, but there's also a personal growth for this steward. So we're basically following Ron Blue's Master Your Money book, And it's an excellent book that I really want to recommend to anybody who's not read it before. It's hugely impacted not just my life, but also the way that we do business and the way that we view finances and faith. So, as we said, in the first session or the previous week's episode, we learned that.
God owns it all.
And this week?
Yeah, we are in a growth process.
Yeah, progressing from few or little to more. In other words, being good stewards. So, Ron Blue basically says, and this is a quote from his book, he says, I believe that God uses money and material possessions in our earthly lives, in other words, our journey on this side of eternity, during this growth process. And then he uses 3 T's. So any of you can just sort of shout these out.
Yeah,
As
a tool, a test, and a testimony.
So it's easy to remember. So these are 3 important the processes that God uses money and material possessions to shape us and to form us and to make us into the kind of people that's becoming more and more Christ-like. So let's just quickly visit each of these 3 areas. So Paul writes to the congregation in Philippians, and this is his letter of joy in verses 11 and 12. So you can just read those 2 verses, please.
Sure. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want.
Okay. So, it's not on the screen, but the next verse, verse 13, what does that say?
Yeah, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Who strengthens me to do what? To pass my exam? Or to strengthen me too?
Yeah.
In hunger?
In hunger, and when
when I'm well fed.
Yes.
Maybe to lose some weight. Or to fast maybe, for the benefit of poor people. Or to get rid of excesses in our lives. And to share that with people who are in need. So, in this sense, possessions and money can be a tool to help us grow in whatever circumstances we find ourselves, that we learn to be content in that circumstances. Right, so these another section where Jesus speaks in Luke 16, verses 11 and 12, if you can read those verses.
So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own?
True riches, almost like being rich in God.
Yeah.
So God says the way that we handle money and earthly wealth is basically a measure on how we're going to be entrusted with true riches. So in this sense, money is not just a tool, but also a test.
Yeah.
And this is very important to remember. Okay, so let's look at the third one. Of these T's. So it's a tool, a test, and then
testimony.
Yeah. So God utilized my use of His resources as a testimony to the world. So the way that we not just work with money, talent, but also or treasure, but also the way that we resource our time, our network of relationships, all of that can be a massive testimony to the world.
Yeah.
If we were to look at our little business, where we, during our very busy schedules with clients and work that we do, as a business, we are involved with a Bible translation project in North Africa through Leave a Lasting Legacy, our Right for the Reason project. You can visit the Leave a Lasting Legacy website if you want to learn more about that. We're launching an advisor academy for young advisors. And then a more recent endeavor that we are involved in, and we're taking the lead in that, is the Advisors for the Nations, a conference that we recently had, but also the movement that we want to launch through South Africa and from South Africa to the nations. So it's not just a measure of the wealth that we gather in our business, but it's also the way that we steward these resources to impact the world. Maybe any thoughts from your side?
And I think also just to to have the boldness, not necessarily to, I think how we saw in that previous verse, not just to be out of a place of having everything and being well fed, but also when we're going through the tough times to still be bold and know and hear from God what we need to do and how we need to do it, and being faithful in the little. And that's how we will be blessed with much one day. But just keep on being faithful, keep on using what God gives us to use. And it's both an outward thing, but I think the change that happens within us while we're busy working with God and being faithful in what He's called us to do is just an amazing journey. And it's a growth journey.
Absolutely. And I mean, you say it so well. But although it's a growth journey and we make a lot of mistakes on the road, it's the attitude of the heart, a willing heart that's surrendered to God, and a heart that says yes to God in obedience. So obedience is also very important. You're not going to grow if you're not going to obey. That's very, very important. Right, so but it can be a massive testimony to the world. So I've just spoken to our Advisors for the Nations movement. We made a commitment 10 years ago in the US to Ron Blue that we will take this movement from the US back to South Africa. That's where Ron Blue was basically in the late 70s. When through the influence of Dr. Howard Hendricks, Ron Blue and Judy, his wife, were basically called back to the US to use his CPA background, start a firm called Ron Blue and Company, basically teach North American Christians to be good stewards of the resources and to multiply the impact of those resources through their giving, through their generosity, that the mission that Ron was initially on, he worked for Campus Crusade in South Africa, can be multiplied through the world. So we cannot just be involved in movements, but we don't have a very strong missional intent in those movements. And that's why we decided to call our Advisors movement Advisors for the Nations, not just Advisors for South Africa or Southern Africa, but Advisors for the Nations. That's God's heart. Okay, so if people want to make contact with us, where can they do so?
Yeah, so please make contact with us. Either email us at info@rig.ac or call us at 086 1221 777.
Yeah, and my prayer to ourselves, but also a prayer for you as a viewer or also as a listener, is that God will use your stewardship and the way that you faithfully work with finances to grow you on a journey to become more Christ-like. Thank you very much, Henny. Great to do this with you.
Thanks, Willem.
Keep well. Till next time.